Chapter 1. The Girl on the Side of the Road. The storm had rolled in with no warning, draping the Colorado mountains in a curtain of rain and fog. Thunder cracked overhead like an angry whip, and the headlights of Rowan Drake's black Maserati barely pierced the thick gloom ahead. He was already 2 hours late returning from a board meeting in Denver, an obligation he'd barely endured, like every one of them since he had handed over day-to-day operations of his tech empire. He hated being in the city. Too many eyes. Too many expectations. Up here, in the solitude of the mountains, life made more sense. The silence never asked him to be anything more than he was. But silence didn't last forever, especially not when it was shattered by the sight of a figure stumbling along the side of the road. Rowan slammed on the brakes, his heart lurching as the car fishtailed slightly on the slick pavement. The headlights illuminated her for a brief second. A girl, barefoot, her dress torn and clinging to her like a second skin in the rain. She froze like a deer caught in the beam, arms wrapped around herself, her soaked hair plastered to her face. He threw the car into park, shoved open the door, and ran toward her without thinking. "Hey!" His voice was sharp, almost too loud against the quiet hum of the forest beyond. "Are you hurt?" She didn't answer. She simply stared at him, her eyes wide and unblinking. There was something fractured in her expression, terror, confusion, and something else. Emptiness. Rowan slowed as he reached her, holding his hands out like she was a wild animal that might bolt. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, softening his tone. "You shouldn't be out here in this weather. Do you need help?" Her lips moved, but no sound came. Then finally, a whisper. "I don't know." He blinked. "You don't know if you need help?" She shook her head, rain trickling down her cheeks like tears. "I don't know anything." A chill ran down Rowan's spine that had nothing to do with the weather. "What's your name?" he asked. I don't know." He paused, the weight of her words sinking in. This wasn't just a girl who had lost her way. This was someone who had lost everything, even herself. "Okay," he said carefully. "I'm going to get you in the car. It's warm. You don't have to talk if you don't want to, but you can't stay out here." She hesitated, swaying slightly on her feet before nodding. Rowan gently guided her to the passenger seat, his coat draped over her shivering shoulders. As soon as the door shut, the world outside was muffled again. The engine hummed, soft jazz spilling from the speakers, an odd contrast to the storm beyond. She sank into the seat like her bones no longer wanted to hold her up. "Do you remember anything?" he asked again once they were moving. "A place? A face?" She stared at her hands in her lap. "Just water," she murmured. "And someone shouting. That's all." Rowan tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "We'll get you to a doctor first. Then we can figure out the rest." "I don't need a hospital," she said quickly, the first real emotion flashing across her face. "Please. Not yet. Just give me time." He glanced at her, noting the bruises blooming across her collarbone, the thin gash at her temple. Whoever she was, wherever she'd come from, it wasn't good. Rowan didn't trust many people, but he trusted his instincts. And right now, those instincts told him she wasn't lying. "All right," he said. "You can stay at my place for the night. It's isolated. Safe." "You live here?" she asked, glancing out at the winding roads, the dense forest hugging the edges. "I built a house up here a few years ago. Not many neighbors. If you're trying to disappear for a while, it's a good place to start." Her gaze snapped to his. "I'm not trying to disappear." "No," he said, meeting her eyes. "But someone might have wanted you to." She didn't reply. She only stared at the rain sliding down the window like falling stars. 15 minutes later, the car crested a gravel path leading to a modern glass and stone house nestled into the hillside. The lights flickered on as Rowan pulled up the driveway, illuminating the warm interior beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Inside, he led her to a guest suite with a private bathroom, gesturing to a set of clean clothes folded neatly on the bed, one of the perks of always keeping extras for unexpected guests or staff. "There's food in the kitchen. I'll make something hot. You can take a shower if you want." She nodded again, clutching the borrowed hoodie tighter around her small frame. He paused at the door. "Do you want me to call the police? Report anything?" Her silence stretched for a long beat. Then, finally, she whispered, "Not yet." Rowan nodded once and left her alone. Downstairs, he moved through the kitchen like a machine, his mind racing. He'd seen broken people before. He'd been one, once. He didn't know who she was. But something told him she wasn't just anybody. She was nobody's girl. And that made her very, very vulnerable. She emerged an hour later, her wet hair towel dried and her skin pink from a hot shower. She wore his clothes, a faded t-shirt and cotton pajama pants that hung loosely on her petite frame. "You look warmer," Rowan said, placing a steaming mug of tea on the island. "No allergies I should know about?" She took the mug with both hands, grateful. "No, I don't think so. You don't even remember your allergies?" She shook her head. "Nothing makes sense. It's like my brain has walls where there should be memories. What's the last thing you do remember?" She hesitated. A voice. A man yelling. And water. Cold. "I think I fell." He watched her closely. "Do you think someone pushed you?" "I don't know." Her voice cracked. But it didn't feel like an accident. Rowan clenched his jaw. "We'll figure it out." She looked up at him, something vulnerable and raw passing between them. "Why are you helping me?" He could have told her the truth, that he couldn't stand injustice, that he had more money than he knew what to do with, and that some part of him still believed in rescuing the lost. Instead, he said simply, "Because you needed someone." She blinked. Tears welled up in her eyes. "I don't even have a name." "Then we'll pick one," he said gently. "Something temporary. Something to anchor you until the rest comes back." She hesitated. "Okay, Sage. I don't know why, but it feels right." "Sage," he repeated. "All right. Until we find out who you are, you're Sage." And something in her shoulders eased. Just a little. But Rowan knew one thing with certainty. Whoever had tried to erase this girl's life hadn't expected her to be found. And now that she had been, they'd be back. Chapter 2. A stranger in his guest house. Morning light spilled through the tall glass windows of Rowan's guest suite, casting golden shafts across the plush gray rug and muted stone walls. The world outside his mountain estate had turned crisp and clear, the storm washed away, replaced by a cloudless sky and quiet birdsong. Sage, if that was her name, awoke slowly, blinking against the unfamiliar brightness. Her limbs ached. Her head throbbed with the weight of 100 unanswered questions. And for one beautiful second, she thought it might have all been a dream. The cold road, the rain, the man in the dark car. But then she sat up and realized she wasn't in her own bed, because she didn't know where her bed was, or if she even had one. The soft cotton sheets smelled of something masculine, cedar, clean soap, and maybe something like coffee beans. The room around her was spacious, but not impersonal. There was a vase of dried lavender on the dresser, a soft throw blanket on the accent chair, and a worn paperback copy of The Count of Monte Cristo resting beside the bed. Someone lived here. Someone real. The man. Rowan. The name came to her instantly, though she wasn't sure why she remembered his and not her own. She stood, her body wrapped in a soft robe now instead of the soaked dress from the night before. Her hair was tied in a loose braid she didn't remember doing. The familiarity of these mundane acts felt strange and foreign, like muscle memory that belonged to someone else. Tentatively, she stepped into the hallway, her bare feet padding against the wood floor. The house was open and modern but warm, stone and glass mixed with hand-hewn beams and minimalist decor. Expensive, yes, but lived in. No sterile museum here. She followed the scent of fresh coffee and something warm, eggs, maybe, bacon, to a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a home design magazine. And there he was, Rowan Drake, dressed in black joggers and a fitted gray long-sleeve shirt that did little to hide his lean, muscular frame. He stood at the stove, flipping something in a cast-iron skillet like a man who did this regularly, which struck her as odd. He didn't look like someone who had time for cooking. He looked like someone who brokered deals and snapped orders and had people who did things for him. But here he was, barefoot, calm, and oddly domestic. He glanced up as she entered. "Morning." "Hi," she said softly, gripping the doorframe. "Sleep okay?" She nodded. "Thanks for letting me stay. I didn't mean to. I know I showed up out of nowhere." "You didn't show up," he said, turning off the stove and sliding the food onto 2 plates. "I found you walking down a highway in the middle of a thunderstorm, wearing next to nothing, bruised and terrified. That's not your fault." She opened her mouth to reply, but found herself stunned by the blunt truth of it. He nodded toward the island. "Sit. Eat. You need protein. Might help jog your memory." She obeyed, unsure what else to do. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up the fork. The first bite of food made her want to cry. It wasn't fancy, just scrambled eggs, buttered toast, and fresh blueberries. But it was warm, comforting, grounding. "You always cook for lost women you find on the side of the road?" she asked after a few minutes of silence. He gave a short, quiet laugh. "You'd be the first." She offered a faint smile, grateful for the flicker of humor. "I don't usually bring strangers into my home," he added, more serious now. "But something told me I needed to this time." "Why?" "Because you looked like you'd already been through hell." He met her eyes. "And nobody should go through it alone." That hit her in the chest like a fist. She lowered her gaze, swallowing hard. "I wish I could remember," she whispered. "Something. Anything. It's all blank. Except little flashes. Sounds. Water. Screaming. A voice yelling my name, but it's muffled. I don't even know if it's real." "It probably is," he said. "Memories don't always return in full. Sometimes they come back in pieces. Fragments. Like dreams." She nodded slowly. "What about feelings?" he asked. "Do you feel anything when you think about those flashes?" The voice, the water. Sage gripped the edge of the counter. "Fear. But not just fear, shame. Like I did something wrong. Like I deserve whatever happened." Rowan's brow furrowed. "That's not true. You hear me? You don't deserve to be hurt. Ever." She nodded, her throat tight, but she didn't speak. Instead, she took another bite, chewing slowly. Processing. He let the silence linger, letting her take the lead. "I keep thinking," she said finally, "that someone might be looking for me. That I'm missing somewhere. That someone is worried." "Maybe," Rowan said cautiously. "And maybe they're not." Her eyes flicked up to his. "I'm not trying to be cold," he explained. "But if you were running away, if someone meant to hurt you, it's possible no one's reported you missing." She dropped her gaze to the plate. "You think I was running?" "I think your body was," he said gently. "Your brain hasn't caught up yet." Sage looked out the wide kitchen windows, taking in the tall evergreens and the mountain lake glimmering in the morning light. The view was stunning. Peaceful. Safe. "How long can I stay?" she asked. "As long as you need," he said simply. She blinked. "You don't even know me." "I don't have to," Rowan said. "I know you needed help. And I've got space. Privacy. No one comes up here unless I invite them." Something in his words reassured her, and yet. "You're not worried I might be dangerous?" she asked, quietly challenging. "I don't think you are," he said. "And if I'm wrong, I'm well prepared." He gestured to the corner of the room where a sleek security system monitor blinked to life, showing camera feeds from the long driveway, the perimeter fence, and the forest edge. "Let's just say I've had reasons to keep this place secure," he added. She tilted her head. "What kind of reasons?" Rowan hesitated, as if weighing how much to reveal. "My company developed proprietary encryption software a few years ago. It's used by government agencies and defense contractors. That made me a few enemies along the way. Cybersecurity, mostly. But I've learned to live quietly since I stepped down." Sage blinked. "So you're, what, some kind of tech mogul hiding out in the woods?" "Something like that," he said with a faint smile. The contradiction made her smile. This gruff, private man with a jawline carved from stone and the instinct to make breakfast for a stranger. He stood, picking up their empty plates. "I'll be in my office for the next couple hours. If anything comes back to you, anything at all, you let me know." "Thank you," she said quietly. Rowan paused by the door. "There's a guest tablet in the drawer beside the couch. It's not connected to the internet, but it has some journals and drawing apps, just in case writing things down helps trigger anything." She nodded again, and he left her with the morning sunlight and the distant sound of lake water lapping against the rocks. That afternoon, Sage sat on the wide back porch wrapped in a fleece blanket, sketching absent-mindedly on the tablet. She wasn't an artist, or at least she didn't think she was, but the lines flowed naturally from her fingers, a shadowed face, a narrow hallway, a tall man with his back turned, reaching for something. She stared at the image, unsettled. Something about the man's outline tugged at her, as if she knew him. Then the image blurred in her vision as tears rose. Who had she been? What had she lost? Inside, Rowan stood in the hallway, watching through the glass. His jaw was tight, his arms crossed. He could see it in her. The way her posture was starting to shift, her shoulders inching back, her gaze sharpening. She wasn't just lost. She was hiding something she didn't even know she had. And whatever it wasn't done chasing her. Chapter 3, Whispers of the Past. It started with a sound. A soft chime, like a bell on the wind, distant and metallic, echoed in Sage's ears as she lay in bed that night. At first she thought it was coming from somewhere outside. The wind maybe. A distant bird. But the longer she lay still, the more certain she became. The sound was inside her head. A memory. Sage sat up abruptly in the guest bed, her pulse skittering. The room was quiet, the fire in the corner fireplace burning low. The house, too, was silent. No footsteps, no creaking floorboards. Only the hum of electricity and the slow rhythm of her own uneven breathing. The bell chimed again. This time, it was sharper, louder. She closed her eyes and pressed her fingers to her temples. Come on, come on. A hallway. White walls. A woman yelling behind a glass partition. Sage clutching a paper bag and a discharge form. She gasped and opened her eyes, heart hammering. Her hands trembled as she reached for the tablet Rowan had given her, flipping to the blank journal section. Hospital, she scribbled. Paper bag. Someone yelling. A bell ringing. The memory was fragmented, like shards of glass scattered across a floor, but it was something. She drew quickly now, herself seated on a cold plastic bench, her knees pulled to her chest. A nurse walking past without stopping. A pair of security guards standing by a desk. There was blood on her arm. She dropped the stylus, hand shaking. The next morning, Rowan didn't comment on the dark circles under her eyes or the slow, haunted way she moved around the kitchen. He just set a fresh mug of coffee in front of her and waited. I remembered something, she said, wrapping her fingers around the mug. Rowan didn't push, just waited. I think I was in a hospital, or some kind of clinic. There was shouting, a nurse or a woman. I had a paper bag with clothes in it. I was being discharged. Were you hurt? I think so. There was blood. On my arm. And I felt ashamed. Rowan's jaw clenched, but his voice was calm. Do you think you were attacked? I don't know. She hesitated, then met his eyes. But I think someone was trying to cover it up. Like they were trying to get me out quickly, quietly. Rowan leaned back, folding his arms. Do you remember any names? The name of the clinic? No. Just a bell. A loud one. Maybe a fire alarm or something. But it wasn't panic. It was routine. Like a hospital code. Rowan nodded slowly. I can start checking hospitals in the area that had emergency discharges during the storm. Maybe there's security footage. You do that. He met her eyes, steady and firm. I told you, you're safe here. But I also want to help you figure out who you are. Sage swallowed past the lump in her throat. She didn't know why Rowan Drake, reclusive tech genius, was offering her this kind of protection, but every fiber in her body told her she could trust him. Still, she couldn't shake the sense that something dark was lurking just beyond the veil of memory. And when it returned, it would not be kind. Later that afternoon, Rowan sat in his private study on a video call with an old contact, Lucia Devlin, a cyber investigator who owed him more than a few favors. I'm looking for an unidentified female discharged from a hospital somewhere in the state 3 nights ago. No ID, possibly under the name Jane Doe. Lucia raised an eyebrow. That's vague. You know how many Jane does the system sees in a week? I know, but this one might have come from a private clinic. Maybe off the books. Lucia leaned closer to the screen. What's going on, Rowan? You don't get involved in things like this. Not since, well, you know. She was walking down the highway during a storm with no shoes and bruises on her wrists. Lucia blinked. You're serious. I want everything. CCTV, patient logs, internal transfers, anything that happened in the last 72 hours. Use my clearance if you need to. Lucia's eyes sharpened. She your problem? Or your guest? Rowan didn't answer, which was answer enough. Lucia nodded. I'll be in touch in 24 hours. As the screen blinked off, Rowan leaned back and scrubbed a hand over his face. He didn't want this. A woman with no name and eyes that looked like they'd seen things they couldn't say aloud. A situation tangled with danger and secrets. But it didn't matter what he wanted. Because the moment he'd seen her that night on the road, broken and drenched, his instincts had told him one thing loud and clear. Protect her. And now, as that instinct hardened into something fiercer, something that clenched his chest when she flinched from her own memories, he knew it wasn't going away. Whatever storm was coming for Sage, he'd meet it head on. And this time, he wouldn't lose. Chapter 4. A name she doesn't know. The name came to her in a dream. Not spoken, not shouted, but whispered, carried on the breath of the storm that still haunted her thoughts. The syllables were soft, distant, tangled with the scent of rain and fear. Alara. She woke with a gasp, heart pounding, the name echoing in her mind. It was the middle of the night, the room steeped in shadows. The wind whispered outside, rustling the trees. But inside, all was still, except her. She repeated it under her breath. Alara. Alara. The name stirred something in her. Not just memory, emotion, longing, sadness. A spark of recognition and loss all at once. Was it her name? Or someone else's? Unable to sit still, Sage climbed out of bed and padded down the hallway, her bare feet silent on the polished wood. She paused outside Rowan's study, the only room she hadn't entered. The door was ajar, soft light spilling from beneath. She knocked. Rowan's voice came, low and alert. Come in. She opened the door slowly. He was seated at a wide mahogany desk, several screens open in front of him. The blue light cast a sharp contrast over his features, focused, unreadable. He looked up, and his expression softened. You okay? I remembered something, she said quietly. He rose immediately, coming around the desk. Sit. What was it? She hesitated, then sat across from him in the leather armchair. A name. Alara. I think it might be mine. Rowan stilled. Alara. He repeated slowly, like tasting the sound. It's not a common name. That's good. It might make searching easier. Or it could be someone else, she admitted. A sister? A friend? I don't know. Let's assume it's you for now. He typed something into a private database on his laptop. It doesn't bring up anything immediate, but I can run it through more systems. She rubbed her arms, suddenly cold. Why would someone erase me, Rowan? What could I possibly know? Rowan hesitated. You said you remember a hospital discharge. A bell. Blood. That doesn't sound like someone trying to protect you. It sounds like someone trying to hide you. Then why let me live? He didn't answer. Because he didn't know. And that, perhaps, was the most terrifying part. By morning, Sage, or Alara, as she was starting to think of herself, felt like the house was closing in on her. The walls, the silence, the overwhelming sense that she was living someone else's life in borrowed clothes and borrowed safety. I need to get out, she said over breakfast. Just for a walk. Some fresh air. Rowan looked up from his coffee. Stay close to the cabin. The trails can be slippery. I will, she promised. 10 minutes later, wrapped in a fleece jacket and soft scarf, she stepped out into the cool mountain morning. The sun filtered through the trees in golden streaks. The forest smelled of pine and damp earth. A breeze brushed her face gently, like fingers through her hair. She followed a narrow trail that wound behind the property, carefully noting the landmarks, an old birch with carved initials, a moss-covered boulder. The air cleared her mind. The movement steadied her. But as she rounded a bend near a small clearing, something caught her eye. A flash of white. She froze, heart stuttering, then slowly approached. It was a scrap of fabric, caught on a low branch. White sheer. Torn. Her breath hitched. It looked familiar. She reached for it, fingers trembling. Suddenly, a shadow passed overhead. A branch snapped behind her. She spun around. No one was there. Alara, she whispered. The forest swallowed the name whole. Back at the house, Rowan was pacing when she returned, the tension clear in his shoulders. He hadn't heard from Lucia yet. The lack of information unsettled him. Sage entered quietly, still holding the fabric. You were gone longer than I expected, he said, his voice tight. I found this, she said, offering it to him. He examined it carefully. It's part of a dress. Possibly yours. She nodded. I think I might have run that night. Through the woods. That path. It felt familiar. Rowan narrowed his eyes. If you did, that means you were nearby. Someone left you out there. On purpose. Sage gripped the edge of the counter. Do you think they're looking for me? I think if they are, Rowan said slowly, they don't want to find you alive. Silence fell between them. Then her voice, small and firm. I want to remember. I need to. Rowan leaned forward. And I'm going to help you. But Alara, until we know who they are, or what they wanted, you need to be careful. No more wandering alone. Not until we know what we're dealing with. She nodded, swallowing hard. Okay. He hesitated, then asked, why that name? Alara? What did it feel like when it came to you? She closed her eyes. Like a song I'd forgotten the words to. Like it had always been mine, and someone tried to take it away. Rowan's jaw tightened. She wasn't nobody, he said. Whoever you are, you're someone. And someone powerful enough to scare the wrong people. A spark flared in her chest. Not fear this time, defiance. Then maybe it's time they found out I'm still here. Chapter 5. Footprints in the Snow. The first snowfall came like a whispered warning, silent, unexpected, and impossibly beautiful. By morning, the forest surrounding Rowan's cabin had turned to a winter portrait. Soft white blanketed the evergreens, coated the stone railing of the porch, and kissed the lake's edge with a quiet chill. Sage stood at the large kitchen window, a steaming mug in her hands, watching the snow drift down like memories she couldn't catch. There was something about the silence after a snowfall that made her feel both safe and watched at the same time, like the world was holding its breath. Rowan entered the room moments later, his presence grounding. He paused beside her, his gaze following hers. It'll melt by tomorrow, probably. Early snow never lasts up here. I hope it stays, she whispered. It's beautiful. You can like snow, he said, handing her a plate of toast, as long as you don't go wandering off in it again. She grinned a little at that. Are you always this overprotective? He gave her a dry look. Only with women who can't remember their names and nearly got themselves killed walking into a storm. Touché. He waited a beat, then asked gently, still thinking it's Alara? She nodded. It still feels like mine, even if nothing else has come back yet. I had Lucia run the name through more databases last night. Still nothing in state records. But I've asked her to cross-check it with private school registries, rehab centers, and medical institutions. If you were somewhere off-grid, they might have buried your name deep. Why would someone go to that much trouble? That, Rowan said, is the question I'm trying to answer. That afternoon, Sage ventured outside again, this time with Rowan watching from the porch, pretending to read, though his eyes rarely left her. She stayed close this time, wandering no more than 100 yards from the house, tracing slow paths in the thin layer of snow. But something strange tugged at her, a sensation like a thread caught in her chest. She paused near the edge of the property, where the trail forked into two narrow paths, one that led down to the lake and one that curved behind the tall trees. And then she saw them. Footprints. Not hers. Not Rowan's. He was still on the porch. These prints were large, heavy, and too fresh to be old. She turned back toward the cabin, her breath catching in her throat. Rowan. He was down the steps in seconds. What is it? She pointed. There. He crouched beside the tracks, inspecting them carefully. His face darkened. Boots, he said. Tactical. Not hiking. These weren't here yesterday. Could it be Lucia? She wouldn't approach without telling me. And not on foot. His eyes scanned the tree-line. Get inside, he said tightly. Now. She hesitated. But what if someone's hurt? His gaze snapped to hers. This isn't about someone being hurt. This is about someone possibly watching. Now go. She ran. Inside, Rowan activated the perimeter sensors and locked the main doors. A moment later, she heard him on the phone. Lucia, we've got company. Fresh prints in the snow. Boots. Heavier than mine. I need thermal drones up now. There was a pause. Yeah, he said, voice flat. I think it's starting. That night, the house felt different. The lights dimmed, the security system armed, every sensor blinking like a heartbeat. Rowan stayed up in his study, monitoring the drone feeds. He hadn't told Sage much more, but she knew his instincts weren't easily rattled. She lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Alara. Footsteps. Snow. The white hallway. Blood on her arm. What if the person who left those prints had followed her that night? What if she hadn't escaped alone? Her hand tightened around the tablet beside her, where she'd spent hours sketching again. This time an image of a man's silhouette standing in the snow, just beyond the trees. Watching. She didn't know if it was real, but she couldn't shake the feeling she'd seen him before. Downstairs, Rowan leaned over the drone feed, jaw tight. No thermal activity on the eastern edge, Lucia's voice said through the speakers. But we found tire tracks about a mile down the access road. Someone parked there and came on foot. No prints leading back. Which means they're still out there, Rowan muttered. Or they found another way out. Doubt it. I built this property to be one way in, one way out. Lucia paused. She's not just a runaway, is she? Rowan's voice was quiet. No, she's not. Should I bring her in? Not yet. She's not ready. And I don't want to risk exposure until we know what they want. Understood. He ended the call, rubbing a hand across his jaw. He didn't know who this woman was, not really. But someone else did. and they wanted her back badly enough to risk coming onto his land. That meant one thing. Whoever she used to be, she was dangerous, or worth something to someone very powerful. Either way, she wasn't nobody, and neither was he. Rowan Drake had spent the last 5 years hiding from the world. But if someone was trying to bring violence to his doorstep, they had just made a fatal mistake. Because he might have walked away from power, but he'd never forgotten how to fight. Chapter 6. The Warning in the Woods. The next morning was eerily quiet. The snow had stopped overnight, and the air was thin and bright, but the stillness outside the cabin wasn't peaceful. It was expectant, like the trees themselves were holding their breath. Sage stood at the window, watching the edge of the forest. The footprints from the day before had been swept away by the new snowfall, but the tension they'd left behind lingered. Rowan appeared behind her silently, holding a second mug of coffee. She took it, their fingers brushing. It startled her, that touch. Not because it was romantic, but because it was real. Warmth, strength, presence. Did the drones pick up anything else last night? She asked, voice hushed. Rowan shook his head. No heat signatures, no new movement. Whoever it was, they came alone, and they're gone now. But that doesn't mean they won't be back. She took a slow sip, eyes never leaving the tree line. I don't think they were just watching. What do you mean? I think they left something behind. Rowan set his mug down. Why do you say that? I don't know, she admitted. It's just a feeling. Like a string I can't see is still tied around me. He studied her for a moment, then grabbed a flashlight from the hook near the door. Come on, let's go check. They hiked into the woods together, staying close. Sage's boots crunched in the snow behind Rowan's steadier pace. She kept scanning the trees, expecting to see someone step out from behind a trunk, a shadow flicker between the pines. But there was only silence, until they reached the clearing. It was the same spot where she'd seen the torn piece of fabric the day before, but something was different now. Her breath caught. There, at the base of a tree, half buried beneath snow and pine needles, was a manila envelope. Rowan saw it too. He moved toward it cautiously, crouched, and pulled on a pair of gloves before picking it up. It wasn't sealed. He opened it slowly. Inside were 3 things: a photo, a flash drive, and a note scrawled in tight, jagged handwriting. He handed the photo to Sage first. Her knees buckled. Rowan caught her before she hit the ground. The photo was of her. She was standing in a hallway, wearing the same torn white dress from the memories she'd drawn. Her expression was vacant, haunted. Her eyes were swollen, her arms bruised. She looked broken. She didn't remember the photo being taken, but somehow, she knew it was real. Rowan handed her the note next. It read, "She knows more than she thinks. You can't keep her hidden forever. V." Sage's hands trembled. Do you know who V is? Rowan asked. She shook her head slowly. But the handwriting, it's familiar. Like a voice I should know but can't hear clearly. He pocketed the flash drive. We'll check this inside. But whoever left this, they wanted us to find it. They wanted me to be afraid, she whispered. He met her gaze. Are you? She stared back at him. No, I'm angry. Back inside, Rowan ran the flash drive through an isolated system in his office, locking the rest of the house's network down. Sage hovered behind him, arms crossed tightly over her chest. A single file loaded. A video. He clicked play. The grainy footage began in a stark, white room, surveillance quality. Sage sat at a table, clutching a paper cup. 2 men stood on the other side of the glass. One of them looked vaguely familiar. The other had his face turned away. I'm telling you, she said in the video, voice hoarse. He's not who he says he is. He lied about everything. Where is the data, Alara? One of the men asked sharply. I don't know. Her voice broke. They took it. I didn't. The feed cut off. Sage sank into the chair behind her, eyes wide. So my name really is Alara. Rowan nodded slowly. Looks like it. And I knew something. I told them someone lied. He clicked on the metadata file behind the video. It was recorded at Norwin Institute, a private facility, off-book, used for holding government witnesses or intelligence liabilities. She blinked. You think I was what? A whistleblower? Maybe. Or maybe you were being held because you knew something someone wanted buried. Then why let me go? I don't think they did. I think you escaped. Alara clutched the edges of her sleeves. That means someone inside helped me. Or you helped yourself. She looked at him, suddenly unsure. Do you believe me? He turned to face her fully. Yes. Not a blink of hesitation. You said you didn't believe in coincidence, she murmured. I don't. Then why me? Why were you there that night? Rowan's expression shifted. Something softened in his eyes. Because I was supposed to be. She stared at him, and for a moment, the silence said more than words could. Later that evening, after the sun had disappeared and the moon hung like a pale ghost over the trees, Rowan stood at the edge of the porch, watching the woods. Alara joined him quietly. I remembered something else, she said. From the hospital, before they released me, a man came to see me. Did he say who he was? No, but he was angry. He told the staff I was delusional, that if I said anything, people would get hurt. Did he hurt you? No, but I think I hurt him. Rowan turned toward her, surprised. Not physically, she added quickly, but I said something that threatened him. He told me I had no idea who I was dealing with. Rowan's jaw tightened. Sounds like someone with something to lose. She nodded slowly, then looked up at him. What happens next? She asked. He didn't answer right away. Then he said quietly, Next, we fight back. Chapter 7. Shadows from the Past. The next day dawned gray and overcast, with low-hanging clouds smothering the mountaintops. Fog curled around the trees like smoke from some unseen fire, heavy and thick. Inside Rowan's cabin, the tension was tangible. Alara sat at the kitchen table, the photo from the manila envelope in front of her. She stared at her own face. Haunted, hollow, nothing like the person she saw in the mirror now. How could I have been her? She whispered. Rowan looked up from his laptop, where he was analyzing the drive again. Because trauma changes people, and survival reshapes you. She traced the edge of the photo. I just wish I could remember what I knew, what they were so desperate to erase. You will, Rowan said. But maybe we don't have to wait for your memories. We might be able to reverse engineer what they wanted you to forget. She looked up. How? I've been running facial recognition on your image against known whistleblower databases, sealed testimonies, and blacklisted organizations. If we can find a match to someone connected to the Norwin Institute, or whoever V is, we can get ahead of them. He turned the laptop toward her. There's one potential hit. Alara Monroe, listed in an encrypted leak 2 years ago, tied to an offshore digital vault of classified data regarding a conglomerate known as the Veil. The Veil, she echoed. He nodded. A network of high-profile individuals, CEOs, government contractors, and defense tech players, accused of laundering intelligence through fake companies and burying war crime evidence. Her breath hitched. And I was involved. Your name was redacted in every public file. But the leaked version was clearer. She shook her head slowly. That's why someone tried to erase me. I had something they couldn't afford to lose. Rowan nodded grimly. Or expose. She sat back in her chair, a deep chill settling into her bones. Do you think I still have it? Whatever it is they're after. Possibly, Rowan said. Even if it's not on you physically, it could be stored somewhere, encrypted, hidden. Maybe you left a breadcrumb trail before they caught up. Alara folded her arms tightly. Then we find it. Before they do. That afternoon, Rowan opened the vault, a literal, hidden safe room behind a bookshelf that slid away on a quiet track. Inside, screens lit up with rows of digital tools, encrypted servers, satellite uplinks. He handed her a headset. You're going to help me build a cognitive map, he said. We'll run a memory retrieval protocol, non-invasive, by triggering sensory inputs while feeding potential data cues. Alara raised a brow. Sounds futuristic. He gave her a small smile. It's just neuroscience meets cybersecurity. As she settled into the chair, her heart thudded. She wasn't sure what scared her more, what she might remember, or what might still be hidden. Ready? He asked. She nodded. He activated the program. A soft hum filled her ears, and a screen before her filled with shifting images. White hallways, coastal maps, secure buildings. Rowan's voice guided her through them. Do any of these locations feel familiar? No, wait. She pointed to an image of a glass skyscraper with the word Kaylee's etched across the front. That one. I think I was there. Not recently, years ago. Rowan's brows furrowed. Kaylee Systems. One of the front companies tied to the Veil. Officially, they deal in emergency logistics and satellite communications. Unofficially, data laundering. Do you think I worked there? Maybe. Or maybe you had access to someone who did. Another image appeared, this time of a secure data server. Her fingers clenched the arms of the chair. That room. I've been there. Do you remember what you were doing? She squeezed her eyes shut. Flash. Rows of computers. Men in suits shouting. A thumb drive in her hand. A woman's voice screaming. She has the original key. Alara bolted upright, yanking off the headset. Rowan reached for her. What happened? I had it, she gasped. The drive. The original. I had the key to decrypt everything. He stilled. Where is it now? She shook her head. I don't know. I hid it. I remember thinking it wasn't safe. I couldn't trust anyone, not even the people helping me. Do you remember where you hid it? No, she said, devastated. Just cold metal, concrete, and something red. A door. Rowan sat back, mind clearly working. We'll find it, he said again, this time more to himself than her. That night, Rowan barely slept. Alara was curled on the couch in the library, sketching again. This time it was the red door, bright, vivid, stark against the gray concrete she saw in her mind. She added faint numbers beside it. 14.7. Rowan, she asked. He looked up from a tablet. Do those numbers mean anything to you? 14.7. He took the drawing, studied it. Could be coordinates. Or a floor level in an industrial building. Do you remember anything else? Just that there was water nearby. I could hear it. Waves. He nodded. That narrows it. Could be a facility on the coast. Rowan, what if someone else knows about it too? They do. She stared at him. He sighed. Lucia called earlier. The prints we found matched a private mercenary group tied to one of the Vale's financial arms. Alara's blood ran cold. They're closing in. Yes, Rowan said. But now we know what they want, and you're not alone anymore. She looked at him, and for the first time since she'd woken up on that mountain road, she felt something stronger than fear rising in her chest. Resolve. Chapter 8. The Red Door. Alara couldn't sleep. Even with the fire crackling softly in the hearth and Rowan's watchful presence somewhere nearby, her mind was far too loud. She sat at the kitchen table in the half-light of dawn, eyes fixed on the sketch of the red door. There was something about it that tugged at her, an instinct, a knowing. 14.7. The number repeated in her thoughts like a heartbeat. The memory of cold steel, the tang of salt in the air, and something else. A faint echo of panic. Of running. The back door creaked open quietly. Rowan stepped inside, brushing snow off his jacket, a rifle slung over his shoulder. Perimeter's clear, he said, setting the weapon aside. But we'll need to move soon. She looked up sharply. Move. They're closing in, Alara. Whoever left that envelope, they've been here more than once. How do you know? He hesitated, then pulled a second photo from his pocket. It was her again, but this time, the image was taken from behind a tree. She was sitting on the porch, drawing. Rowan was in the background, drinking coffee. The timestamp read 2 days ago. She swallowed hard. They were watching us that recently? He nodded grimly. Which means they're waiting for something. Or someone. I've contacted Lucia. She's en route with a new safe house. We'll leave at nightfall. Alara folded the sketch and tucked it into her jacket. Not until we find the red door. Rowan's eyes narrowed. You're remembering more. Not clearly, she said, but enough. I think it's somewhere near the coast. I heard waves. There was metal, steel beams, maybe. I don't know if it's a warehouse or a storage site, but it's connected to everything. He paced slowly, considering. There's a decommissioned shipping yard 2 hours east of here. It used to be under private contract with Kaylee Systems. I hacked into the blueprints last night. One of the older facilities has a basement level, codenamed R14. 14, she whispered, and it sits 14.7 meters above sea level. Her breath caught. That's it. Then that's where we go, Rowan said, already reaching for his tablet. But we can't go blind. I'll prep the gear. Lucia will provide backup. We leave in 5 hours. The drive to the shipping yard was quiet. Rowan handled the wheel with expert calm, scanning the back roads with sharp eyes. Alara sat beside him, the sketch in her lap, nerves tingling beneath her skin. The sun began to dip behind the mountains as the city fell away, replaced by vast open roads and long stretches of industrial silence. By the time they arrived, darkness had claimed the sky. Lucia was already waiting. Dressed in tactical black and perched beside a matte black SUV, she gave Alara a small nod. Nice to finally meet the woman keeping Rowan up at night, she said dryly. Rowan shot her a glare. Focus. Lucia smirked, then handed Alara a small earpiece. Stay close. If anything feels off, we leave. The facility loomed ahead, shadowed and silent. Rust streaked the steel sides of the building like old blood. A broken sign hung crooked over the chain-link gate. Kaylee's storage unit, 3B. The three of them slipped inside the fence and moved quickly through the main floor. The interior was dark, the air thick with the smell of salt and oil. Long-abandoned crates were stacked haphazardly, dust covering every surface. Alara stopped suddenly. "I've been here," she whispered. Rowan turned. "Where?" She pointed down a narrow hallway. "That way. The stairs go down to the lower level." They followed her lead. At the end of the hallway, they found the staircase, steep, steel, coated in grime. At the base, a heavy red door stood waiting, just like in her sketch. She reached for the handle. Rowan stopped her. "Wait." He scanned the edges. Found a motion sensor, long dormant, but still wired. Lucia disabled it with a flick of her wrist. "Clear." Alara pulled the door open. Inside was a narrow corridor that led to a room lined with old servers and file cabinets. Most had been stripped or destroyed. But in the far corner was a locked drawer with a biometric scanner. Rowan knelt beside it. "This requires either a keycard or a print." "I remember this," Alara murmured. She pressed her thumb to the scanner. The drawer clicked open. Inside was a metal case no bigger than a lunchbox. Rowan opened it carefully. Inside lay a small black flash drive and a photograph. Alara picked it up. It was of her and another woman. Same white dress. Same bruises. Her heart stopped. "I know her," she breathed. "Her name was Zoe. She helped me escape." Lucia moved closer. "She didn't make it, did she?" Alara's voice broke. "They found her first." Rowan placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then she didn't die for nothing." He held up the flash drive. "Let's get this home." But just as they turned toward the door, a red laser flashed across Rowan's chest. "Don't move." A voice echoed from the darkness behind them. A man stepped into view. Sharp suit. Cold eyes. Gun raised. Rowan's expression didn't change. "You're late." The man smirked. "And you're predictable." He looked at Alara. "I see the girl finally found her way home." Alara's breath hitched. "Who are you?" He tilted his head. "You really don't remember?" Rowan stepped in front of her. "Touch her, and I bury you here." The man smiled coldly. "Now why would I do that, when she has what we've been searching for all this time?" He raised his gun. But before he could fire, a shot rang out from behind. Lucia's bullet hit his shoulder, sending him crashing to the ground with a shout of pain. "Time to go," she barked. Rowan pulled Alara by the hand, and they ran. As alarms began to echo from the building's far corners, they sprinted through the dark, the red door slamming shut behind them. Chapter 9. Unfinished Business. Alara's pulse hadn't slowed since they fled the facility. Back in the SUV, Rowan sat behind the wheel, driving like a man with something to lose. Lucia rode shotgun, scanning traffic and security feeds from her tablet, her gun within easy reach. The metal case sat between Alara and Rowan, the flash drive inside feeling heavier than it should have been. "They knew we were coming," Alara whispered. Rowan's jaw clenched. "I know. Do you think that man followed us from the cabin?" "No," Lucia said. "He was waiting. They've been monitoring that facility. Baiting us, maybe. But why let us get that far?" Alara asked. Rowan glanced at her. "Because it wasn't about stopping us. It was about seeing who showed up." Her heart dropped. "So we walked into a trap." "They didn't expect us to get out with the drive," Rowan said. "Now they're on defense." Lucia leaned back in her seat. "One thing's clear. We're not just dealing with shadows anymore. This is organized, funded, and personal." Alara stared out the window. "The man, he looked at me like I was something he owned." Rowan reached over and covered her hand. "You're not." She didn't pull away. By the time they reached the new safe house, a secluded lodge nestled in the high hills of a remote state park, the night had grown cold and still. Snow had begun to fall again, lightly dusting the roof and trees. Rowan led the way inside, carrying the case. Lucia double-locked the doors and activated security measures. Cameras, motion sensors, even thermal imaging. They weren't taking chances. In the main study, Rowan placed the flash drive on a steel plate surrounded by a Faraday shield. "Let's see what was worth dying for," he muttered. He inserted the drive into an isolated laptop and brought the screen to life. Dozens of folders populated immediately. Names, contracts, off-the-record payments, private communications, and most chilling, video files. Alara leaned forward as one loaded. A grainy recording played. two men in military gear dragging a young woman into a concrete room. She screamed. She begged. The file stopped. Lucia swore under her breath. Rowan clicked through a second. This time, a government official, someone Alara recognized from the news, was seen handing off a briefcase to a private contractor in a sealed warehouse. The camera angle was covert. Time-stamped. Dated. Alara sat back, numb. This is it. The whole operation, Rowan said. Human rights violations. Secret detainments. Black market intel sales. And all of it buried under fake companies and government red tape. Lucia whistled. If this gets out. Rowan looked at Alara. It's not about if. It's about how. She met his eyes, steel in her voice. We exposed them. Every name. Every crime. Lucia hesitated. That's not going to be easy. These people will do anything to keep this buried. We need a secure release plan and protection for you. I'm not hiding anymore, Alara said. I've done that for too long. It cost Zoe her life. I won't let it cost anyone else. Rowan smiled faintly. Then we fight back smart. He turned to Lucia. Send copies to the international watchdog groups. Use dead drop servers. Stagger the release. Lucia nodded. On it. As she got to work, Rowan pulled Alara aside. There's something else I need to ask, he said quietly. She looked up. What is it? The man at the facility. Did he trigger anything, any memory? She paused. I think his name is Draven. I don't know how I know that. But when he looked at me, it felt like a chain tightening. Rowan's jaw hardened. Draven Kessler. Former intelligence liaison turned private contractor. Rumors tie him directly to the Veil. So he's the one who locked me up? Rowan nodded. And if he's resurfaced, he won't stop until he has you again. Alara stepped closer. Then we can't let him win. You're not alone, Alara, he said. You never were. She looked up into his eyes and, for the first time, didn't feel like a ghost of herself. She felt like a woman standing in the storm and not backing down. Later that night, while Rowan checked the perimeter and Lucia monitored the feeds, Alara wandered onto the balcony. The snow had stopped. Moonlight bathed the mountains in silver. She wrapped herself in one of Rowan's flannel shirts and leaned against the railing. Zoe's face haunted her. That smile. That promise. You were braver than I was, she whispered to the stars. But I'll finish what you started. The door creaked behind her. Rowan stepped out, holding two mugs. He handed her one and leaned beside her. Couldn't sleep, he asked. She shook her head. Too many shadows. He nodded. They don't all disappear at dawn. They stood in silence for a moment. Then she turned to him. Why did you save me that day? On the road. His eyes softened. I've seen a lot of things, Alara. But I've never seen someone so broken, still trying to breathe. She swallowed. You didn't know me. No, he said. But I saw you. Their eyes met, and the weight of everything between them tightened into something fragile and real. I'm not her anymore, she said. The girl in that photo. I can't go back. Rowan reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Good, he said. Because she wasn't free. But you are. And for the first time in a long, long while, Alara believed it. Chapter 10. The Price of Truth. By morning, the cabin was humming with movement. Lucia had set up a secure uplink to whistleblower agencies across 3 continents. Rowan hadn't left the den all night, combing through the files on the flash drive, categorizing them by severity and jurisdiction. Alara stood over his shoulder, studying the screen. Every name, every face, every line of evidence. Each one connected to the Veil and the horrifying puzzle that had stolen her life. Rowan rubbed his eyes. We're sitting on enough to collapse an empire. But that's the problem, isn't it? She said quietly. Empires don't fall without a fight. Lucia entered the room, phone pressed to her ear. We've got a hit. 2 of the watchdog groups responded. One is ready to release files and staggered leaks across international media. The other is cautious. They want proof of chain of custody. Rowan looked at Alara. That's you. She nodded. Then let's give them what they need. Lucia handed her a voice recorder. Tell them everything you remember. Not just the files, but the people, the threats, the escape. Make it personal. Truth is harder to bury when it comes with a face. Alara sat down, heart pounding. Rowan gave her an encouraging look. She pressed record. My name is Alara Monroe. I was part of a program designed to manipulate, erase, and control information deemed dangerous by private contractors. I witnessed crimes. I saw lives destroyed to protect secrets. And I ran. Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. I was kidnapped, tortured, and wiped. They thought they broke me. But I remembered. And now I'm here to say, I'm not afraid of them anymore. She ended the recording. Silence followed. Then Lucia whispered, "That'll make headlines around the world." Rowan stared at her, something deeper than admiration in his eyes. Hours later, Rowan stepped out for a satellite call. Alara stayed behind, scrolling through the final folders. Then she saw it, tucked at the bottom of a directory labeled Failsafe. A video file named Testimony Z, timestamped 4 days before her disappearance. Her fingers trembled as she clicked play. The footage opened on a sterile room. A single overhead bulb. She sat in the center, thinner, paler, her hands shaking. "I don't know how long I have," her recorded self said. "But I know what they've done. I've hidden the master key, encrypted, off-grid. If you're seeing this, I failed to stop them. But you don't have to." Her eyes on the screen burned with fierce resolve. "Find the red door. Look beneath the floor panel." The footage glitched, then ended. Alara's heart stuttered. She called out, "Rowan." He rushed back in. "What is it?" She showed him the file. "There's something under the floor panel. We missed it." Lucia was already grabbing her gear. "Let's go." Back at the shipping yard, they moved with stealth and speed. Alara led them straight to the red door. The cold metal loomed, the memory of being held there tightening around her chest. Rowan crouched and began searching the floor. "Here, this one's loose." Lucia helped him pry it up. Beneath was a metal box, sealed but intact. Rowan opened it with care. Inside was another flash drive, a small journal, and a photograph. "Zoe." Alara gasped. "She left this for me." Lucia scanned the journal quickly. Encrypted notes, coordinates, passphrase. "This is the master key." Rowan grinned. "We've got everything." But then, a faint beep. Alara froze. "Did you hear that?" Lucia pulled her weapon. "Tripwire. We triggered something." Rowan's eyes darted to the far wall. "Move. Now." They sprinted for the exit just as the first explosion went off behind them. Fire licked through the stairwell. They burst into the open air, diving behind crates as the facility roared with flames. "They knew we'd come back," Lucia coughed, hauling Alara up. "They wanted to destroy the rest," Alara said, eyes watering. "But we beat them to it." Rowan grabbed the case and the journal. "Let's finish this." Back at the lodge, Alara and Rowan watched as the final data upload completed. Whistleblower agencies now had full access. Trusted journalists were already confirming leaks. Interpol had issued inquiries on multiple corporations. Arrests were pending. Lucia stood beside them, silent for a moment. "It's done," she said finally. "We just changed the world." But Alara knew better. This wasn't the end, it was only the beginning. Rowan came to her, resting a hand on her back. "You okay?" She nodded. "Tired, but lighter." He smiled. "You carried a storm and survived. That deserves more than okay." She smiled weakly. "Zoe would have loved to see this." "She saw it," he said softly. "Through you." They stayed like that, quietly watching as the storm they'd unleashed began to sweep through the world, bringing justice, consequences, and a reckoning long overdue. Chapter 11. A Reckoning Begins. The next 3 days passed like a whirlwind. News anchors across continents stumbled over names they were never supposed to read aloud. Corrupt government officials resigned under pressure. CEOs were arrested at airports. The veil, once only a whispered rumor in the darkest corners of international espionage, was now being shouted from every headline. Whistleblower Alara Monroe identified in explosive leaks. The veil's network exposed. International manhunt underway. From ghost to guardian, Alara Monroe breaks global silence. Rowan watched it unfold from the lodge's study, a quiet pride in his eyes. Lucia coordinated with legal watchdogs and protection agents, building layers of security around Alara's identity. And Alara? She stood in the middle of it all, a storm wrapped in stillness. People wanted interviews, documentaries, exclusive tell-alls. One American news outlet even called her the new face of modern courage. But for Alara, it wasn't about fame or glory. It was about Zoe, about the nameless girls in grainy videos, about finally being seen and heard. On the 4th morning, Lucia walked into the room with her phone held high. "It's Draven." Alara's blood went cold. "What?" He released a statement. Lucia said grimly, tossing the phone onto the table. The video showed Draven seated in a dark room, dressed in his usual sharp suit. Calm. Too calm. To those celebrating today's news, don't get comfortable. You've unmasked pieces of a machine far bigger than your narrow understanding. But remember, machines adapt. And Alara Monroe, you forget whose name you used to wear. I made you. I can unmake you. The screen went black. Rowan let out a string of curses. Alara stood frozen. Is he bluffing? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucia's mouth was a tight line. No. He's warning us. Rowan leaned forward. He's out of moves, and that makes him dangerous. He knows we have the master key. Now, he's going to try to destroy what's left of your name. Alara squared her shoulders. Let him try. Later that evening, Rowan took her aside. Lucia has secured a long-term relocation plan. Full witness protection. New ID, new country, everything. Alara blinked. You want me to run again? I want you safe, he said gently. The veil isn't fully dead. Not yet. She crossed her arms. If I disappear now, they win. Rowan's voice was low. You've done your part. No one would blame you for walking away. But I would, she said. He looked at her with a mix of admiration and pain. You're fearless, he said. No, she corrected, stepping closer. I'm just done hiding. The words hung between them. Full. Final. Fierce. Rowan reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. I've never met anyone like you, he murmured. Her breath caught. Rowan. He stepped back, as if pulling himself from a ledge. Sorry. No, she said softly, don't apologize. And just like that, the air changed. The fear that had hovered for weeks began to loosen. In its place was something warmer. Quieter. Steady. Hope. The next day brought a ripple of change. One of the encrypted messages Alara had recorded went viral. Millions watched as her trembling voice described the facility, the girls, the desperation. But it wasn't her fear that moved them. It was her defiance. I am nobody's girl, she said in the final line. But I'm still here. And I remember everything. Rowan turned to her after the clip ended. Do you realize what you just started? Alara shook her head. He smiled. A revolution. Lucia came in with a satellite phone. Interpol wants you to testify, virtually. They're coordinating with 5 nations. You'll have the highest security clearance available to a civilian. Alara took the phone. Set it up. She looked at Rowan. Let's finish what we started. That night, Rowan found her sitting outside again, this time beneath a velvet sky. Stars stretched endlessly above them. The fire crackled softly beside them, casting golden light on her face. You haven't asked me what comes next, she said after a long pause. Rowan glanced over. What comes next? She smiled. I don't know. They both laughed quietly. I'm not sure I'll ever have a normal life, she admitted. But maybe that's okay. Rowan sipped from his mug. Normal is overrated. She tilted her head. And you? What happens when this is all over? He was quiet for a long moment. Depends on where you are. Her heart flipped. You saved my life, she said. But more than that, you gave it back to me. He looked at her, eyes full of something unspoken. You gave it back to yourself. She reached out, took his hand. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was drowning. For the first time, she felt seen. Held. Home. And in the background, though danger still stirred and enemies still watched from the shadows, one thing was clear. The reckoning had begun, and Alara Monroe would see it through. Chapter 12. The Girl Who Wouldn't Burn. The world called her a whistleblower. The headlines called her a hero. But Alara didn't feel like either. She was just a woman clawing her way out of the fire, refusing to burn. Her testimony, delivered virtually from the safe house under full security encryption, was broadcast to 5 government inquiries. The room had been silent as she detailed what she'd endured. Her memories weren't perfect, but they were sharp enough to draw blood. She had named names, told stories, cried once, but she didn't flinch. After the final call ended, she'd sat frozen, her hands trembling. Rowan had knelt beside her, silently slipping his hand into hers. No words, just presence. Steady, grounding. I can't believe it's over, she whispered. It's not, he replied gently. But the worst of it is. Lucia confirmed that arrests had begun in 3 countries. Several members of Kaylee's systems had already entered plea deals in exchange for immunity. The Veil's inner circle was crumbling. But not Draven. He was still out there. Still silent. 3 days passed. The tension never fully left. Every shadow outside the cabin felt like a threat. Every drone overhead made Alara's heart leap. Then Rowan disappeared for 12 hours. Alara paced the kitchen, restless. He hadn't said where he was going, only that he'd handle it. Lucia tried to distract her with case updates, but Alara barely heard a word. When Rowan finally returned, his clothes were damp with cold and his knuckles were raw. Alara jumped to her feet. "Where were you?" He held up a drive. "Draven's firewall. I cracked it." Lucia blinked. "You went after him?" Rowan nodded. "I traced his comms to a private bunker in Austria. Remote location. Off-grid. But this," he waved the drive, "is every asset he's holding. Every name. Every lie. Every cover-up. Including proof of his direct role in what happened to Alara." Alara swallowed. "Then we end it." Lucia hesitated. "There's a chance Draven will retaliate." Rowan's voice was calm. "He already has." Alara stepped forward. "Then let's make sure this time he fails." Lucia uploaded the final files to the Global Justice Coalition. Within hours, an international arrest warrant was issued for Draven Kessler. Interpol placed him on the red notice list. His photo now sat beside known war criminals and exiled oligarchs. Alara watched the news reports in silence. He had hunted her for months. Owned her past. Haunted her future. Now the world hunted him. Rowan came to stand beside her. "How does it feel?" "Like freedom," she said. Then, more quietly, "Like grief." He nodded. "That's normal." She turned to him. "He ruined me." Rowan's eyes didn't leave hers. "No." He tried. She swallowed the knot in her throat. "Then why do I still feel broken?" Rowan reached up, gently cupping her face. "Because you're still healing. And healing isn't weakness. It's proof you survived." A tear slipped down her cheek. He wiped it away. "You're not broken, Alara," he said. "You're becoming." And then he kissed her, not in passion, but in reverence. In quiet awe of a woman who'd walked through fire and come out gold. She kissed him back. Because she wasn't a prisoner anymore. She wasn't a ghost, a fugitive, or a memory on the run. She was here. Alive. Loved. Later that night, Lucia stood in the study, phone to her ear. She hung up, her expression unreadable. Alara and Rowan looked over. "Interpol just raided Draven's bunker," she said. "He's gone. Vanished. They think someone tipped him off." Rowan's mouth tightened. "He'll go underground. We won't find him now." Alara took a breath. "Then he'll spend the rest of his life running from the truth. That's his sentence." Lucia nodded. "But your story? That's not going anywhere." The news was already reporting on a possible Nobel Peace Prize nomination. Survivor groups were reaching out. Nonprofits were offering to fund advocacy tours in Alara's name. And all over the world, women who had been silenced were finding their voices. Not because Alara had been perfect, but because she had refused to disappear. Because she had remembered. Because she had survived. 2 weeks later, the safe house was still, quiet for the first time in months. Alara stepped out onto the deck in the early dawn. Snowflakes drifted lazily through the trees. She wrapped herself in Rowan's coat and leaned against the railing. He joined her minutes later, coffee in hand. "You're up early," he said. She nodded. "Couldn't sleep." "Thinking about what's next?" She turned to him. "I don't think I want to disappear." He nodded, waiting. "I want to live. Loudly. Honestly. Help the girls who didn't get the second chance I did." "You will." She looked up at him. "I want you in that life." His breath caught, but he smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." They stood there, two souls no longer hiding, no longer haunted, watching the sunrise paint the world new. And Alara, once a name buried in silence, now burned brighter than ever. Because she was nobody's girl, and she would never be forgotten again. Chapter 13, No Longer Running. The wind that once carried whispers of fear now rustled softly through the pine trees outside the cabin, as if nature itself had exhaled. The safe house, which had been a fortress and a cocoon, now felt like something else, temporary. Alara stood at the edge of the forest, her boots crunching gently in the snow. The morning light dappled through the branches, soft and golden, illuminating her face. She was no longer watching for shadows. She was learning to look forward. Behind her, Rowan packed up gear. Lucia was on a call with a contact in Geneva, finalizing arrangements for a summit where Alara would be the keynote speaker, a global initiative for survivors of covert abuse. Alara closed her eyes. The wind carried memories. Screams, locked doors, the chill of sterile concrete. But the wind didn't win anymore. She had outlasted it. A twig snapped behind her. She didn't flinch. Rowan stepped up beside her, resting his hand lightly on her back. Still not used to the quiet? She smiled faintly. I'm still not used to being free. He studied her profile. You're not just free. You're powerful now. She turned to him, thoughtful. Does it scare you? How far this has gone? He was quiet a moment. Then, yes. But I'd do it all again for you. Her chest tightened. It was still strange, to be believed, to be protected, to be loved. But she was learning to stop questioning it. Some things didn't have to be earned through pain. They just were. Like hope. Like Rowan. Inside the cabin, Lucia wrapped up her call and turned to them. Interpol officially closed the first wave of investigations. 42 arrests, 16 convictions already. They're pushing for full sanctions on Kaylee's systems. Draven's remaining partners have gone silent. Alara exhaled. So what now? Lucia smiled. Now, we give them something they can't silence. She handed Alara a tablet. On it was the draft of Alara's speech for the Geneva summit. Rowan looked over her shoulder as she read. Her own words echoed back at her, written in her voice, but clearer now. Older. I used to think survival meant silence. But silence is how they won. I'm not nobody's girl anymore. I'm my own. And I speak now for every woman who thought no one would hear her. Alara swallowed hard. Lucia set a gentle hand on her shoulder. This isn't just your ending. It's your beginning. The flight to Geneva was quiet and smooth. Security met them at the private terminal, and the team was ushered into a secure car bound for the historic venue near Lake Geneva. It had once hosted world leaders. Now, it would host a girl who used to have no voice. Alara stepped onto the stage with a heart full of history. Not just her own, but Zoe's. Rowan and Lucia watched from the wings, proud, unreadable. As Alara approached the microphone, the audience fell silent. She paused, looked at the sea of faces, politicians, journalists, survivors, and skeptics alike. I was never supposed to stand here, she began. I was never meant to speak again. That's what they counted on. She told them everything. Not just the facts, but the feelings, the suffocating fear, the coldness of captivity, the cruelty of forgetting who you are. But she didn't cry. Because today, she was not a broken thing. She was fire. When she finished, the room erupted into a standing ovation. And though cameras flashed and questions buzzed from reporters, Alara didn't flinch. She smiled and walked off the stage into the arms of the man who had never stopped fighting for her. Back in the hotel suite, Rowan poured 2 glasses of champagne and handed her one. To freedom, he said, clinking her glass. She raised her brow, and to finding it beside someone who never ran. Rowan smirked. You didn't run either. Not really. She looked at him, really looked. I've been thinking, she said, about what comes next. His eyes warmed. Yeah. I don't want to hide. I don't want to be on the run or off the grid. I want to live. Start something that helps survivors. A foundation. Education. Policy change. Rowan grinned. I was hoping you'd say that. She tilted her head. You think I'm ready? I think you were born ready. You just needed the world to catch up. She stepped closer. And you? I go where you go, Alara. Wherever that is. Her heart filled so fully it ached. They stood at the window together, watching the lights of the city reflect off the lake. The world outside was flawed and dangerous, but it was hers now. And she was no longer a girl hiding in the dark. She was a woman who had faced the fire and refused to burn. Chapter 14, The Return. 3 months later, Alara stepped out of the sleek black SUV and stared up at the crumbling brick facade of her childhood home. The wind was softer here than she remembered, gentler somehow. The small town hadn't changed much. The crooked sign outside the diner still squeaked in the breeze, and Mrs. Dalka's tabby still slept on the library steps. But everything inside her had changed. She wasn't here to reclaim the past. She was here to release it. Rowan stepped up beside her. You sure about this? Alara glanced at the porch. The steps still sagged where she used to sit during rainstorms. The windows, dusty and dark, reflected her new face back at her. Older, wiser, unafraid. I need to see what's left, she said. And then let it go. He nodded and gave her space. She walked to the door slowly, hands brushing the railing as if tracing old memories with new skin. Inside, the house was still, quiet. Dust floated in golden slants of sunlight. Her footsteps echoed across creaking floorboards. It wasn't haunted, just hollow. She opened drawers that hadn't been touched in years. Found a hairbrush, a photo of her and Zoe, a faded notebook with lyrics they'd written when they were 13. She pressed it to her chest. So much had been taken. But not this. Not the core of her. In the living room, she found the old piano, its keys yellowed but intact. She sat, her fingers trembling slightly as they touched ivory. And then, music. Tentative at first, then stronger. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. Rowan listened from the doorway, his heart full. She played until the sun dipped behind the trees, until the shadows melted, until the memories felt less sharp, less painful, and more like pages in a story she no longer feared to read. When she stood, she walked back to Rowan and slipped her hand into his. "Let's go home," she whispered. And they left. Back in the city, Ilara's foundation launched quietly, but it made noise anyway. The Zoe Project, a nonprofit dedicated to rehabilitation for survivors of systemic abuse and institutional trauma. Zoe's name was now more than a whisper. It was a movement. Rowan joined her as head of operations. Lucia stayed on as strategic counsel, and Ilara became the face of something bigger than a mission. She became a symbol of what comes after. The media attention eventually settled. The world moved on to new crises. But the work remained, steady, meaningful, sometimes exhausting. Ilara learned to love the routine. Meetings with donors, interviews with advocates, long hours at her desk surrounded by faces she was trying to save. She'd never been so tired. Or so fulfilled. One night, Rowan found her asleep at her desk, surrounded by open folders and scribbled notes. He lifted her gently, carried her to the couch, and wrapped her in a blanket. She stirred. "I was working." He smiled. "You were dreaming." She blinked up at him. "Sometimes I forget this is real." He brushed a kiss across her forehead. "It's real. You're real." And in the quiet of that room, with the city lights flickering beyond the window, Ilara Monroe knew she had finally come home. But the past has a way of leaving echoes. It came in the form of a single email. Subject: "We need to talk." Sender: unknown. Lucia traced the source, encrypted, but familiar. The signature matched a name from the earliest files Ilara had leaked. A woman known only as Owl, a top analyst who had vanished after the first wave of Veil leaks. "Should we reply?" Rowan asked. Ilara read the message again. "They're rebuilding. Quietly. Not Kaylee's. Something else. You need to know. I owe you that. Meet me." Below it was a time. A place. A day. Ilara's pulse quickened. She looked up. "This isn't over." Rowan's jaw tightened. "Do you want it to be?" She shook her head. "Not if there are still people in the dark." Lucia leaned forward. "Then we don't walk away. But we don't go in blind, either." Ilara nodded. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about protection, prevention, purpose. Rowan stood beside her, shoulders squared. "Whatever comes, we face it together." Ilara reached for his hand. She had been a ghost, a fugitive, a victim. Now she was a survivor, a protector. And as the sun set on the city and the next chapter opened before them, one thing was certain. She was no longer running. She was rising. Chapter 15, Nobody's Girl, Everybody's Voice. The train hummed softly beneath Ilara's boots as she stood on the platform in Berlin. It was early morning, the kind of pale, misty dawn that painted everything in quiet silver. The station buzzed faintly with the rhythm of a waking city. But Ilara didn't hear it. She was listening to something deeper. Intuition. Memory. Resolve. Rowan stood beside her, dressed in a dark coat, a subtle earpiece tucked under his collar. Lucia had coordinated a quiet team nearby. No press. No fanfare. Just one woman stepping back into the shadows. Not to disappear, but to shine a light. The message from Owl had been short. Coordinates. Time. No signature. If it was a trap, they were ready. If it was truth, Ilara would listen. Because the mission had never really ended. It had only changed shape. They found the meeting point. A tucked-away cafe with ivy crawling up the walls. A bell chimed overhead as they stepped inside. It was empty, save for one figure in the back. A woman in her late 50s with a streak of silver in her braid. Sharp eyes. A quiet strength. "You came," she said. "Ilara Saturday, your Owl." The woman nodded. "My real name is Sophia Rayner." Lucia, joining by secure line via Rowan's tablet, nodded in recognition. "You were part of the ethical review board that tried to halt Project Kessler." "I failed," Sophia said simply. "And I've been running ever since." Ilara leaned forward. "Why reach out now?" Sophia pulled a flash drive from her coat and slid it across the table. Because it's happening again. Different name. Same structure. A corporate rebrand. This time under the guise of biometric security. Rowan took the drive. Evidence. More than enough, Sophia said. They've already acquired 2 facilities. They're targeting displaced minors, refugees. No oversight. No guardians. Just ghosts, like we once were. Alara's stomach turned. Where? Sophia looked her in the eye. One is already operational. Istanbul. The other's under construction in northern Canada. They're calling it Sanctum. The irony made Alara's throat ache. Why now, she asked. Why me? Sophia's voice softened. Because they know your name. And they're afraid of it. Alara looked down at the flash drive. This wasn't just about closure anymore. It was about protection for girls who still hadn't found their voice. Rowan's hand slipped gently onto her shoulder. Lucia's voice came through the tablet. We move tonight. Quietly. We'll get the data verified. Go to the World Tribunal before week's end. Alara looked up at Sophia. Will you testify? The woman's lips twitched. Only if you do, too. They shared a moment of quiet understanding. 2 survivors. 2 witnesses. 2 torches in the dark. Later that night, back in their temporary suite overlooking the river, Alara stared out at the water. Rowan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. You okay? She leaned into him. I will be. He kissed her temple. We don't have to do this forever, you know. She turned to him. But maybe that's the point. We don't have to. We choose to. He smiled. Spoken like a woman who used to run, and now walks straight into the fire. She smiled. I'm not afraid of fire anymore. He nodded, serious now. Whatever comes next. I'm with you. Not as a bodyguard. Not as your partner in war. Just as yours. Her throat tightened. I've never belonged to anyone. I'm not asking you to, he whispered. I'm asking to walk beside you. She kissed him, slowly, deeply. And when they pulled apart, her eyes were fierce. I think it's time we stop thinking of this as the end, she said, and start seeing it as the start of everything. 6 months later, the Zoe project expanded into its 3rd country. Hundreds of girls had been rescued from off-the-grid systems. The story of the girl who survived the veil had become more than an expose. It had become a warning, a movement, a legacy. Alara stood on a stage in Vancouver, looking out at a sea of advocates, survivors, allies, and officials. Her speech was brief, but powerful. I used to think I had no name, she said. No future, no voice. But now I know, my silence wasn't my weakness. It was the quiet before the roar. A roar of applause followed. Lucia smiled from the crowd. Rowan stood off stage, arms crossed, pride in every line of his face. And Alara? She stood tall, whole, unafraid. She had once been nobody's girl. Now she belonged to no one, and stood for everyone. Her voice would echo for years. In policy, in stories, in other girls who would learn, because of her, that no cage could define them. And in the end, Alara Monroe didn't just survive the fire. She became it. Dear listeners, thank you for joining us on this unforgettable journey through Nobody's Girl. Alara Monroe's story is one of fire, freedom, and fierce resilience. A story that reminds us that even when the world tries to erase us, we can rise, rebuild, and roar. Maybe you saw yourself in Alara. Maybe you faced silence, or shadows, or scars of your own. Let this be your reminder. You are not your past. You are not the fear that tried to hold you down. You are the voice that rises anyway. Whether you're healing, hoping, or still holding on, your story matters. And just like Alara, you are not nobody. You are somebody. You are enough. From all of us at Ever After Audiobooks, thank you for listening, feeling, and believing. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to leave a comment. We love hearing your thoughts. Subscribe so you never miss the next powerful romance. Share it. Someone out there needs this story. Until the next audiobook, keep listening, keep loving, and never forget, the strongest stories are written with grace, truth, and hope.